Welcome everyone. Today I have a very special guest with me here, Igor Seletskiy. Igor is the president and CEO of CloudLinux Inc, who is an engineer himself out of NYU. He founded the company in 2009 in Palo Alto, California, which is since the beginning is on the mission to make Linux secure, stable, and profitable. This company now has over 4,000 customers and growing worldwide, and they have reached more than 200,000 product installations. It's a very nice and interesting company. 100% remote working, which as you people know, I really like remote working wherever I can and however I can. And the company itself, because of the nature of being 100% remote company, it's made up from a lot of smart people all around the world. So I have Igor here with me today to tell a little bit more about the company and some upcoming news to share with you all. Igor, can you tell me how an engineer like yourself from NYU ends up founding a leading and successful company around Linux and open source itself?
Sure. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to this interview. So I'm an old school. I was when I first came to university, and that was in '94. I was introduced to CentOS, later Solaris, and I fell in love with Linux. Before that, I only knew Windows. So Unix was great, Unix was beautiful, so I started to look for a way to run it on my home computer, which wasn't something powerful. And I went through pretty much everything. I went through SCO Linux, I tried FreeBSD, but SCO Unix, but I did like Linux the most. I like that I could actually do stuff in it. I could touch kernel. I did some small, tiny modifications to it. It was fun. So at some point, I decided I never want to touch Windows again. I want to do Linux. And as I was working, I would introduce Linux to the companies. It was at the time when a lot of companies didn't even know that such thing exists. I would do everything and would work only on Linux. And at some point, when I started my first company, it was all around Linux. And when I started this company, it was only Linux. So it's been a good ride, but I come from the standpoint of I really like Linux.
You also tried BSD, as you said yourself, and you might not know, but I did for the 50th episode. I interviewed Kirk McCusick himself, and you can imagine he was quite an awesome guest to have on the show, and he had a lot of interesting things to share from back in the days from BSD. So you might want to go back and have a listen to that. And what was the first Linux distribution back in the day you piqued your interest into venturing into Linux?
You know, I'm pretty sure it was Slackware. Actually, I don't think it. That's a good question. I know that I started with Linux 1. I don't remember which distribution it was. I remember it was on a floppy disk that I got it. It wasn't even over the internet or something. Uh, my memory escapes me, but it's a really good question.
I see. So eventually you started to get involved in Linux. Did you also started to contribute to open source at that point?
I tried unsuccessfully. So I remember when I tried to submit my patches to Postgres database, uh, didn't happen. I don't remember. I just got bogged down in the process. It was too complex. So no, I don't think there is any or many patches from me personally to the open source. But the company itself, we did a lot of open source work that went back to community. Uh, Nothing major. I hope that now what we're doing with AlmaLinux will be my first major contribution to the community. But we just could never do something that was really, really important, and it was for the community, and it was something that I always wanted to do.
Because if someone is not familiar with CloudLinux, the company, if you look at CloudLinux offerings today, mostly your product or your products are towards enterprises and hosting providers. You have more than one product. You have CloudLinux OS and CloudLinux OS Plus, kernel care and Immunify 360. You also offer now, as we saw what happened with the CentOS, extended lifecycle support for CentOS 6 versions. But these are typically for as we mentioned, for hosting providers and big corporations. But when the news came out regarding CentOS, when Red Hat decided to exit, to turn into a developer release, so to say, not to have it as a stable release anymore, then you saw the opportunity and you decided to fill this void. What we'll talk about later on. What created on the market that there were a lot of people using CentOS, startups, small companies, even individuals who either were not ready or couldn't upgrade at that point to a Linux distribution with a support contract coming with it, because your products CloudLinux is practically CentOS based or CentOS compatible, binary compatible operating system which comes with a support package. But I have to say, when I looked at the prices, it's very affordable. Can you tell me more about your actual products right now you have from CloudLinux focused towards these customers, the hosting providers and enterprises?
Of course. So I always was, or I started my business career in hosting industry. So one of my first softwares that I sold commercially was software for hosting providers back before .com boom. So I'm really old school. So, but the point is that even when I started CloudLinux, I was doing it for hosting companies. And they are a rare breed. They are very different from what people see overall in enterprise space. For them, the technologies that they're using and hardware, software is a huge part of their costs. So they're very, very mindful of how much they spend, and they don't have money to pay a lot for the software that runs on their servers. It's just the model, and we can't break it. So when I was doing CloudLinux OS, the idea was to solve a particular problem that they had. It's a bad Apple problem. When you have thousands of users on a single server, one user can affect other users, and we were solving this problem. And that's how we started. We created CloudLinux OS, which is a fork of Red Hat. When we started, it was CloudLinux OS 5, a fork of Red Hat Enterprise Linux 5 that had some additional proprietary stuff that were added on top. But as part of it, we also had to basically clone Red Hat Enterprise Linux and sell it at. We specifically chose the price that is very affordable for hosting providers. That's how we started. That's how we got our initial customers, and that's how we got traction. But over the years, it's been more than 10 years, we released CloudLinux 5, 6, 7, 8. So for years, we were repackaging Red Hat Enterprise Linux and making it easy for people to switch from Red Hat Enterprise Linux or from CentOS to CloudLinux OS. It worked well. Like 5 years into it, we added rebootless kernel updates for people, so that another problem in hosting again is that uptime is extremely important. So you can't just turn off the server and have hundreds, thousands of sites go down while software is updating. So we released the rebootless kernel updates, kernel care product, and we had a good traction with it with hosting. But what we also got, and we weren't looking at it, is that a lot of enterprise companies came to us and said, hey, we also need it. We have a huge fleets of servers, and there is many reasons why they need it. They need it because it's hard to update thousands of servers. Like, it's easy to reboot 2 servers, but it's really hard to reboot 10,000 servers. So they had gradual rolling reboots, etc. Second of all, because of the SOC audits and things like that, they needed to be compliant. They needed to update kernel within 30 days. And it's quite often very hard for enterprise to cycle their servers within 30 days. So we started to get those customers, and that's what introduced us to the enterprise market. And today it's probably half of our customer base. What's also interesting, we see a lot of enterprise customers, people with thousands or tens of thousands servers running CentOS and depending on CentOS. It just, for them, the cost of running the same number of servers with commercial Red Hat license is too high. They cannot afford it. So there is a huge footprint for CentOS free license in enterprise space. These companies have a very strong sysadmin team. People know Linux inside and out. They don't need any support from Red Hat, but they do need a stable distribution. And we've seen it because of kernel care. And that's also why we released extended lifecycle support for CentOS 6, because we had a lot of customers in enterprise space who were running CentOS 6, and they were reaching this end of life period. So we went to them and said, like, we have already in place all the infrastructure to provide patches beyond CentOS end of life. Would you be interested in it? And they were extremely excited because they had 2 choices. They had to either update right away, which is often very difficult because they have a lot of custom software that would need to be rewritten, or they would need to buy a Red Hat subscription, which is extremely expensive. So that's also what happened. We had a lot of success with extended lifecycle support for CentOS 6. And now we're thinking about, well, actually we are going to announce extended lifecycle support for Oracle 6, and we're thinking of doing the same for Ubuntu 16.04, so that people who need extended lifecycle support, that need another 2-3 years beyond end of life of Linux distributions that they are using, that they can still get it and not worry about security issues.
Okay, so you're not gonna be only involved with CentOS and its derivatives, but you venture out towards, like you mentioned, Ubuntu and Oracle to provide support to those platforms, but those two leaving behind. And also, as we mentioned, you are coming out with AlmaLinux, which is meant to be a 100% drop-in replacement or a continuation of CentOS 7, providing a one-on-one stable release mirrored from the actual Red Hat stable release. What do you think that? Because you mentioned already that it's a very big market, but what would you estimate how big of a void Red Hat is leaving behind now? How many people suddenly their hands have been just left up in the air, not having options from nearly from one day to another?
I'm afraid to estimate the number of people, but I definitely see millions of servers. We're talking about millions of servers that need this free, stable operating systems that has 10-year life cycle, that people don't have to worry about migrating or doing upgrades that would break things. I know that some people are thinking about Ubuntu as an alternative, and Ubuntu is a great OS. There is no problem with Ubuntu, But one of the things where Red Hat shines, and I like Red Hat. I think they're, well, now it's IBM, but they were a great company. I'm sure they're still a great company. But they were able to produce extremely stable Linux distribution, and they support it for 10 years. That's a lot for people who don't do a project that is dead in 2-3 years. It is really important to be able to install a system, install software, and not touch it for the next 10 years. And Red Hat was providing that, and CentOS was a free alternative to it for people for whom it's a better fit. And we're really talking about millions of servers that need such alternative.
Yes, right now, as you mentioned, the only viable alternative would be, with this much of a traction in life cycle or support, would be FreeBSD, because I remember of that discussion with Kirk that the providers or companies who choose FreeBSD in this example are the ones who want to do exactly just the same, like you said. They want to set up an infrastructure and not worry about upgrading it in the at least in the next 10 years, and make sure that they have those security patches and they are taken care of. But now, as we know that CentOS is going away and AlmaLinux is coming, hopefully soon. How soon you coming out with AlmaLinux? Because I think everyone is waiting.
Yes, so we are trying to get the beta out either end of January, like our target date is end of January. I hope it will not slip to first week of February, but we should have a beta ready by that time, and we hope to have a productions fully stable release by end of Q1. So we understand that a lot of people are trying to make a decision now. So we want to have a solution for them as soon as possible so they can make a decision. It's all about vote of confidence. People will vote with their legs if they see that CentOS ecosystem is not gonna survive, and they would actually have to migrate to something like Ubuntu or FreeBSD. Even though I wouldn't like, I have my doubts about FreeBSD as a reliable going forward product. But yeah, if they will decide, like Ubuntu has only 4 to 5 years life cycle, so it's a major negative comparing to CentOS, comparing to Red Hat, comparing to what we're trying to do with AlmaLinux. So we're trying to create this alternative to people to see that, hey, I can continue with CentOS 8 today, and then in April or March or May, I will just run a single line script and I'll be running AlmaLinux, and I don't have to worry about it for another 7, 8, 9 years.
Yes, actually, that will be very nice, because I also have some CentOS servers running in the cloud, and I will really appreciate this one-liner script to move myself to AlmaLinux. Like you mentioned, I don't think that there is a lot of competency in this sense, because people who or companies who choose BSD or FreeBSD, they chose it because it fits to their workflow and what they do, and they are not particularly the same people or customer who would choose or who chose before CentOS or even Red Hat. The good thing here is people now left with an alternative, and not just an alternative, because if you look at the landscape right now, there are after the news of CentOS hit the ground, many new things started to sprung up, fresh, like the grass after rain. Suddenly many people decided, oh, let's make a fork of Red Hat, and let's make an alternative to CentOS. But in the case of CloudLinux, we're talking about a company which already established itself, already proved itself with a viable product. And if we want to say it this way, AlmaLinux comes from a little bit from the roots of CloudLinux, or how much the two product will be similar or different?
Yeah, I mean, they will be very similar. Reality is that Cloud Linux OS is really minor deviation from Red Hat. It has some proprietary modules that are needed by hosters, but otherwise it's as close to Red Hat as it is, and that is why we even went out and decided to do Alma Linux, because there is other people who are trying to do this. Rocky Linux is a great community effort to build CentOS 8 clone, and I wish them all the luck. I think it's a great team of great people who are doing a really good thing, and I'm glad they're here. But when we saw this announcement of Red Hat, and first of all, we got a lot of calls from customers and partners, because they are dependent on CentOS. Some of our customers, they actually run some of their fleet on CentOS, and then they switch servers that need to be to Cloud Linux OS. And some of the vendors that support Cloud Linux, their only other alternative is CentOS. So they called us and said, like, what are your plans? What are you going to do? Because we have pretty much no alternatives. And there was some limited worry about community-driven fork of CentOS, not CentOS, Red Hat, like Rocky Linux, that it will follow, that they might not succeed. Will they have enough time? Will they be able to do it? Will they be able to maintain it? So people were questioning it, yet people who are using us already, they know just how close we are to CentOS, and they were asking us about it. And from our standpoint, we have the build system. We're already building all those packages. We're doing it for 10 years. We have all the specialists needed, all the professionals who can patch the software. So, for example, we actually have a team of people who receive a lot of security vulnerability updates from non-disclosure lists and prepare the updates in parallel with Red Hat. We have people who are who know Linux kernel very well, glibc really well, MySQL very well, Apache, etc. We can maintain a lot of packages even without the help of Red Hat, even though we do plan to match Red Hat. But the point being, we're in a really good position of saying, okay, Cloud Linux is Cloud Linux. It continues to be Cloud Linux OS, is for hosting providers, and it is a commercial offering. But here's a free solution for the community that community can take a run to solve all those problems they're solving today with CentOS 8. And that's where we're coming in. It is not a completely new effort for a company. We're reusing 95% of what we're doing for Cloud Linux OS. That's why we can deliver it fast enough. That's why we're doing it overall, because we know we can do it quite well.
Exactly. Like I said, that I couldn't even compare what your company is trying to do, bringing this product AlmaLinux to the market, to a great but community effort to bring something similar or matching to the market. Again, when like you mentioned yourself, that Cloud Linux already proved itself more than 10 years. It proved itself that you guys have the know-how and the infrastructure, the manpower, and I really hope that you guys have the funds to do this and bring it forward and successful, because you did already with Cloud Linux in the past. So, like you mentioned, there is no big difference between doing one or the other. And you mentioned all these professionals at your disposal. Do you think that it is a great it is one of your great assets that thanks to that the company thrives itself to be a 100% remote company? Do you think that it enables the company itself to obtain this talent and these very smart people, no matter where they located, compared to if you were a traditional company with a headquarter like let's say in the US, then each time when you need to bring some smart and talented people from overseas, you have to go through a lot of paperwork and a lot of bureaucracy, and maybe those people not really comfortable moving to a new country. Do you think that it's an enabler in this case, and it helps the company to effortlessly obtain what needs to be obtained to do what it has to do, and develop these products like AlmaLinux and CloudLinux?
Yeah, so we started as a traditional company. We had two offices. We had office in the US and we had a development office in Ukraine. But at some point, we realized we simply cannot find talent in Ukrainian location. And it's not like it was a bad city, just that we needed very specialized and very high-skilled talent. And it was impossible to find. And at some point, like 3-4 years into it, half of the people were outside the company and half of the people were in the office. Outside the company, I mean working remotely. So the understanding was that we need to switch to fully remote because the communications do fail when you have an office and remote work. So you either have to have an office and everyone working from the office or mostly from the office, or you have to be fully remote. And 3-4 years in, we realized we have to start switching and become fully remote. We started to hire more and more people remotely, and then at some point, Ukraine had lots of unrest, and our office was actually in a contested territory in Donetsk. So we just said, okay, we're closing down the office and we're going fully remote, and it was absolutely right decision. It helped the company a lot. It made things so much better. We lost some people didn't want to work remote, but we gained much more really top level talent, and there is no doubt in my mind that we wouldn't be able to achieve what we were able to achieve if we would continue to be a traditional company with an office environment.
I mean, I think a lot of company could take some notes from CloudLinux, because I don't know if you know this, but this half of the world where I live in Europe, in Spain, they want to. We have that expression that they want to chain you to a chair, and sometimes it's more important that you sit there at your desk in an office from 9 to 5, let's say, than actually that you do your job and you do your duties to your fullest. And they struggle in this half of the world to understand that sometimes potential cannot be driven to its highest velocity or in its best capacity if you stick to old methods. Like you said, some people probably miss going to the office, but I think the future is definitely going forward that people can work from wherever they want remotely.
Of course. Yeah, I had multiple conversations with people who want to know how do we do it, and one of the number one question I get: how do you make sure that people actually work for 8 hours a day? Do you do like time tracking, or do you do all that stuff? And no, we don't. We totally trust our people, and what happens is that once you trust your people, what you're spending much more of your effort on is not on time tracking or how much the person actually sits in front of computer, but just how productive the person is. And that's what a lot of people lack overall. They don't track how much people produce, provide, how much value they generate for the company versus how much time people spend in front of their desk. So it's a complete shift for us. We really don't mind people not working for half a day or working some different shifts that are not used for us. What we care is that people do excellent job. We keep them accountable to doing a really good job. But in the end, it works out great for us, and it works out really well for people who we employ. We have very high retention rate. People love working for our companies. Before COVID, a lot of our people would move to a different country for 3 months and work from there. They would continue working while traveling, and it was great. It is still great, but now we cannot travel as much.
Yeah, now there is no travel, there are no events in the IT world, and pretty much nowhere. So last year and as it looks like this year will be hard as well. But I think that as many companies did during this pandemic, I think that this move of CloudLinux, stepping into and filling this void which has been left behind by Red Hat. If I had the power, I would seriously send them a thank you note, a letter signed that thank you very much for enabling my business to grow beyond and beyond, because I honestly think that it will grow this company CloudLinux exponentially, because I think it's a very, very big market. And what Red Hat failed to realize, or IBM, I don't know which one to blame at this point, is that that when people look at these things at a financial point of view, I mean, a finance director looks at this and says, "Oh, look, we are giving away our software for free, and we could actually we could charge these people." That's wrong, because they probably saw most of these people who were using CentOS as a kind of like people when they cheat on their tax forms, and they thought that they are free riders. But I think what happened in most of the cases that as always, startups and small companies, like we probably mentioned, they cannot immediately afford to sign up with a hefty subscription like in a case of Red Hat. And another example is when, like you mentioned, when it's a small company and they have the know-how and they have the smart IT people who can manage Linux, and they say, we can manage Linux. We have people working for us 40 hours a week. They can manage our Linux infrastructure. We don't need a subscription contract for that. So most of those people, examples like the small companies and startups, if they were using CentOS when they still couldn't afford, or they didn't need a subscription at that point, but they built on the same foundation from the very first day, when the time presented itself, or the opportunity, or the need that they had to be compliant, or for any other reason, or they reached a certain point in their company growing up, and they said, okay, so now we definitely need to switch to a Linux platform which is coming with a support or in the subscription model. If you were not on CentOS in this example before, from the beginning, Red Hat couldn't expect those people to. I didn't want you from when you were, just a little company. I only wanted you from the moment you had the money. You cannot just throw away your infrastructure. So I think, and I honestly think, that a lot of people, I always say people, but I mean the companies, a lot of companies who will start out with AlmaLinux like they used to do with CentOS, I think a big percentage of them will eventually turn out to be a paid customer in the form of CloudLinux, or perhaps another CloudLinux kind of supported Linux distribution. But what do you think of that?
Well, so we actually don't want people who use AlmaLinux to buy CloudLinux from us. CloudLinux is really niche distribution that serves a particular purpose, hosting, and if you are not in hosting, you shouldn't buy it. It's just not for you. So we look at AlmaLinux as our way to give back that we can afford. We're a very successful company. We are growing very fast. We are very profitable. I believe it is because we're doing a good job and treating our customers nice. But for a decade, there was always this thing for us that, hey, we're taking so much from open source, we're not giving back. So now I'm seeing an opportunity to give back. I'm not saying we're not seeing any ways to profit from it, but the way we see our profit from it is mostly by establishing a name in enterprise space, making more people know who we are. We have other products like rebootless kernel updates, extended lifecycle support that will be easier to sell simply because people know who we are. So I think it's a win-win from that perspective. I also think that CentOS, and I'm talking CentOS before it got acquired by Red Hat, because even once Red Hat acquired it, there was no future for CentOS as a community. It was something that Red Hat would turn into money at some point, and there was nothing about open source with it. But I do see AlmaLinux as a strong open source community that will provide a free alternative that will have things like FIPS compliance, because that's one of the things a lot of people need. But that's the only thing they need. They need FIPS compliance. They don't need support. They don't need anything else. That will have faster updates that CentOS had. We simply have more people who can do it, and we're on the lists. Like we're not afraid to actually patch things ourselves because we've been doing it so long. I see significantly more work with interest groups. Even when CentOS existed, there was also Scientific Linux because universities needed something else. It actually they stopped doing it because they were expecting to use CentOS going forward, but now we have that. So I do hope to work with other special interest groups like universities, like whoever else, to create, based on AlmaLinux, other absolutely free distributions that are based on the needs of those sub-communities, smaller groups of communities that want something that very much like Red Hat CentOS, but somewhat different. So I do see that AlmaLinux can grow into it, and I do hope that we will be successful and that we can gain the trust of the community, that we will not abuse them, because we really don't want to abuse the community.
I would really love to see a version of AlmaLinux. I don't know if the name would be the same or not, which I could apply in an enterprise scenario. You know, for example, at my job, we have a couple of old Linux servers with Debian running just a couple of things, you know, like an SVN server or stuff like that. And I would really like something like CloudLinux with the support, but as you mentioned, that's aimed more for hosting providers, very niche market. Something like an AlmaLinux, but with option to support, because I would really not take an enterprise towards Red Hat. One reason being the price, that it's I think it's very, very expensive, and the second thing is that as we mentioned, that Red Hat already turned on the community, not once but twice, because probably you also remember that Red Hat Linux used to be free to download for whoever who wanted to use it. You could download and use it, and if you wanted support, you could get it, and you could pay for it. And then they made the switch when they renamed it to Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and they said no more free riders, no more I download Red Hat and I can say I don't want the support, and I can use the same operating system like those guys who pay for the support. And around the same time, CentOS came as from the community, the original community driven, and then as you mentioned, also Red Hat took over. So I would like to see a kind of like a like a third product in between Cloud Linux and AlmaLinux, one which I could honestly offer to the enterprise clients, uh, being small or big, and which doesn't have a tainted history of already turning on their people already more than once.
We had several people coming to us and asking for that, so there is clearly demand. Uh, we don't know, we just don't have a position on that right now, and there is multiple reasons why we don't. So first of all, we want to keep ourselves separate enough so that we don't have this conflict of interest of we want to push people on Alma Linux to buy our support. Because I mean, I don't know if it will happen, I don't know if it will not happen, but in my mind, it's a concern. So unless I find a way to reduce this concern, I'm not looking forward doing support. So I have to come up with either solution to concern or not do it. Second of all, we're a software company. We're doing really good software. When we're doing software, we're making sure that it doesn't require a lot of support. Our support is fine. We're doing good support as well, but uh, we sell the softwares that don't need support, or at least that's how we're trying to do it. And this will change the DNA of the company a bit, which once again is a problem for me. Another thing that I'm thinking, there is a handful of companies that provide CentOS support. So I am planning to talk to them how we can work closer together with them, so we can still provide this uh, Alma Linux professional support with SLAs, with compliance, with everything that people need at affordable prices. I just hope that there is going to be not one company, but 50 companies that can provide such support, and people will have a choice.
I really hope so. I really hope so, and I'm very eager to see how all this turns out, and eventually what decisions you and your company will will take. Because as you see, even as I mentioned from my experience and from my side, there is a big demand, uh, a big demand for various products, not just the one you are already trying to fulfill with Alma Linux, but there is even more segment on the market which definitely needs something solid and something honest and something they can rely on, which is not gonna be Red Hat for sure. Not since what they did with CentOS. I want to thank you for your time today. It was a real pleasure, and I really hope that Alma Linux keeps its schedule to release. I don't know if you have anything else you would like to add.
Thanks for having us here. Uh, I just want to reiterate that we hope to have a beta by the end of this month. I hope more and more people will come to almalinux.org. Leave your email if you're interested so we can notify you once it's ready. We do expect it to become a community project from the standpoint of we do need people to help with documentation, we need people help with testing, we need people who want to take it to the next level and express their interest in what uh, other things can be built on top of Alma Linux so that it can happen for them. It is done for the community, and we want to create a strong community around this project.
So, where people who would like to help or contribute, where they should go?
So there is a site almalinux.org, and we have a form there where which you can submit. And once we have something, we really don't need like we want to get the beta out, and then we will have this community involvement and everything. But for now, we're just collecting uh, emails of people who are interested in testing, being part of the community, etc. So they know once we're ready.
I wish you all the success.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.